I'm ready.
All right.
I'm going to continue trying to figure this out, though, but
All right, Anthony. Thank you for sharing.
live on
Welcome.
air.
Yep. Welcome to another Sunday Superversive live stream. I am your host, Benjamin Wheeler, here to talk about Hades, as well as just kind of, uh,
Greek mythology in video games.
yeah, but also work balance. Because, like, this is one of those stories that kind of makes me feel dirty playing it, knowing the background for this game. But it's also like I paid it and I'm past the point I can ask for a refund, so it doesn't matter anymore. So it's
So,
like I'm just stuck
what
with it.
about the story makes you feel dirty playing it?
Isn't it about some guy trying to come out to his dad about being a homosexual?
Uh, I don't know. That was Ken's theory on it.
Oh,
Ken was
okay.
thinking. So,
I mean, don't
so
get me
Ken's
wrong.
theory was that the director, who I believe it is true that the director is gay, and his theory was that this was like, his whole relationship with his father was like a gay thing. However, that's not like in game. That's not part of the lore or anything.
Well,
I mean, you can make Zagreus gay if you want to, but whatever.
which isn't going to happen because this is a Christian
No.
manga. Uh,
Yeah.
Too bad. So like I looked into it because I like spoiling myself on video games and stuff like that, and
Yeah, I do that with everything.
it's like, but why can't I date like Medusa? Like it's like the only reason this was even
You can
like,
romance Medusa, but I think she turns you down because she doesn't want to get between you and your other polyamorous love triangle people.
all right, Anthony, Zeus or I mean, sorry, Aphrodite or Poseidon.
Boons?
Just say one.
Poseidon.
All right. So Hades is a game about Zagreus trying to escape the land of the dead, and sort of reach Olympus, where all his loving family members are waiting for him.
That's only the surface level of the story, and that's not exactly true. Although I
Oh,
suppose we're gonna spoil it, right?
oh, absolutely.
Yeah, so that's not quite true. That's not really what the game is about.
Oh,
So the game is actually about Zagreus trying to find what happened to his mother,
that's true.
who is Persephone. In fact, they even, if you pay attention to the dialogue, one thing about Hades that's extremely impressive is that it has like an unreal amount of dialogue cues, like thousands and thousands of dialogue cues
Oh
and
yeah,
triggers, which is really impressive. I'm not always enamored with the quality of the dialogue, but the attention to detail is good. But and if you pay attention closely to the dialogue, you'll realize that Zagreus doesn't actually have any intention of making it to Olympus,
oh
and that
yes.
if they mention like, so what am I gonna do about the gods? And they're just like, don't say anything. You know, if they're helping you out, let them help them. And he also points out, like, besides, he can't say anything even if he wants to.
Right.
So it's not really about him. However, it is about him escaping to the surface. Some of these fluff are, Hades got a lot of critical love, and in my opinion, it's well deserved. I'm a really big fan of the game. Uh, I greatly enjoy it. I think that the gameplay is very well done. So there seems to be this idea that the dungeons are randomly generated, a lot of dungeon crawler type RPGs, but that's actually not the case. The dungeons aren't randomly generated. They're like the order you get them in is semi-random, you know, depending on where you are in the world. But each dungeon, each chamber is actually like handcrafted, which is really impressive
Oh
and
yeah.
super giant. And Supergiant Games is also the same team that did both Bastion and Transistor. And I loved Bastion. Bastion's also a great game. And I enjoyed Transistor as well. And I know you really liked Transistor, right?
I love Transistor. Like, it's one.
They're one of those indie darling studios, that all of the critics adore because like there's a lot of heart in all of their games. You could see they have passion for it.
So like, this is the first time I've wanted to do more than just like burn through the game as fast as I can. Like, if Transistor has a flaw, it's that you don't really want to replay it unless you really enjoyed the story. And it kind of molds together. Well, this is like a lot of it is just like me. I just remember more inherently in between stages. Like, it's just a better product.
Hades is incredibly replayable. What was that?
I just want to play more of it.
Yeah. Hades is incredibly replayable. Like it's like alchemically designed to hook you.
I mean, it's got the roguelike feel to it that just feels so good.
Yeah, I mean, it is a roguelike. I think that if you want to get technical, people would call it either a pseudo or a semi roguelike
What makes it
because
semi?
you could make changes in between. You can improve your abilities in between runs and they hold, which makes it not a pure roguelike. A pure roguelike, I think technically you would restart from the beginning with absolutely everything completely gone.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if you wanted to get more persnickety with the classification, it would be something like a semi roguelike or pseudo roguelike or something. FTL is the same thing, by the way. FTL is considered it because you can upgrade, ship upgrades hold in between. You could switch ships and whatever. I think it's actually considered like a pseudo roguelike and not a roguelike per se. It's interesting that they're even considered like, you know, close to the same genre when they're not even remotely similar games. Like I would go as far as to say that whether you like FTL and whether you like Hades are basically unrelated to each other, but they have the same conceit where you need to progress through to the ending over and over and over again. You know,
Yeah.
which is kind of where roguelike gets its identity from. But I loved it. I think it's a great game.
I noticed that like with
Ken
a
says I currently have 73 hours, 3 weeks logged onto that game.
you guys
Yeah, I have a lot.
you guys convinced me to get it, and
What
it
were
was
you
on.
saying?
You guys convinced me to get it, and it was on sale. You know, it helps.
Sale always helps.
Yep. Thank you, Gaben, Lord of the Gamers, from his Valve throne, never updating TF2. Gaben.
However, they did update Left 4 Dead 2, which is
I know.
ludicrous.
Right?
How's that even possible?
Right? I didn't think it had enough players. It's like, but why?
Oh, Left 4 Dead, I still play when I have time. I still play Left 4 Dead 2, and it is still very popular.
Huh. Because it's like Team Fortress 2 still has like 10 to 100,000 players on at any given time, and it's like, no support for the boys in red and blue.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, Left 4 Dead 2. So my story with Left 4 Dead 2 is that one day for like 2 hours, Valve gave it away for free. And I remember when this happened because all of the like old timey players on the Left 4 Dead 2 forums were pissed. Like they were all really angry at this because a whole bunch of newbie players just flooded in at once, me being one of them. And there were a lot of people who were like very salty about this. at the time, but it was probably the right move from a marketing perspective.
Yep.
Ben, drink from the fountain, don't die.
No. Yeah, I'm only drinking from it because I have to.
uh, so as far as Hades goes, and as far as it uses its Greek mythology, I think the as far as the writing quality of the game and how it uses Greek mythology, I think that the writing in Hades is solid but unspectacular.
You see, like,
I think it's good enough. I think people are a little bit too crazy about it. I think some of it is that they're confusing the sheer amount of dialogue in the game with good
quality.
writing.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think any of it's like terrible or anything, but I wouldn't call it good,
It's it's
or at least not all of it.
it's got that middle ground quality to it. Like the thing with like good dialogue is that it's practice, 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 but also a certain amount of luck. Like people can be like, "Yeah, I can write good dialogue." No, it's just you've had enough of a social life that you know what good dialogue sounds like. Um, Not everyone is lucky enough to have like cool and interesting friends who talk about. No, I'm kidding. Um,
Yeah,
but it's
yeah,
it's
but
it's it's harder than it looks. The fact that there hasn't been a dialogue option, except for all the ones with Meg, pre developing your relationship with her, has been like quite like I haven't really liked her. But then there's things like Medusa, which is just Medusa's head flying around doing maid chores, by the way, and the pun justifies the game just by
it does
itself. Like it's like that's it.
because
That's
in game she's only called Dusa,
yep.
so you have to like work it out on your own, kind of. And they don't really tell you like if you follow it long enough, they'll go like, "Hey, what is your backstory?" And she's just like, "I don't want to talk about it." But then like you put it together in your head and you go, "Wait, she's the maid, Dusa, maid." Oh, and it's a 10 of 10 pun.
Yes, it's like the
It the,
best thing ever.
it is the like clearly you know that that conversation went that they didn't really know what to do. Then somebody came up with that pun. Everybody looked at each other and burst out laughing, and then they said, "That's going in the game. I don't even care." Like that was the conversation. They were like, "You know what? After hearing that pun, they said it's going in the game. That's what's happening. You can't stop it."
Right. And she's got like great voice acting, good like so it's like this. Gaming has had such a bad time with like how things are going that it's like something with even medium quality like this where I'm about to meet a character who's like just like, "Oh, I'm going to beat the tar out of you," and that's it. That's all she says, Electo, which isn't as bad as Tripsanis or whatever her name is. Um just
Oh,
because
to Tiffany,
yeah, just because who like
the
just
murder
scream
one.
yeah, just screams murder and all that jazz. It's like, you know,
She's actually hilarious, and there's like a mini character arc involving her that's really funny.
really.
Yes, give some time to the game because that.
No.
So the character arc with Tisiphone, if you want to call it that, I'm stretching it a bit, calling it a character arc, is that Zagreus gets annoyed that she's calling him murderer all the time. She's like, "I'm not a murderer." You go, "Well, that's sort of by technicality, though, Zag, because everyone you're fighting is already dead, but whatever." Anyway,
Right.
so Tisiphone does sort of have a point, but whatever.
Ooh.
Uh, the point is that with Tisiphone's murder thing, Zagreus goes, "Okay, how about this? I'm going to teach you how to say my name. It's not murder, it's Zagreus. Zagreus." And over the course of like many runs, she'll slowly learn to say your name. And then he'll be like, "Yes, got it." And then she kills you anyway. And he goes, okay, so let's try something else. We're gonna go with happy. Can you say happy? She just yells, Zagreus, murder. He goes, okay, so that did not work as I had intended. It's actually pretty funny, so I'm gonna give some credit to Symphony. She actually works surprisingly well.
Well, I'll look forward to that character arc then, because it does sound pretty funny.
It is.
So like I swear that like various characters have become easier after the first or second time you beat them. Just because it's like it's easier. Oh my goodness, I'm gonna die. I'm gonna
Uh,
die on stream.
I think it's because of the upgrades you get at the mirror
Yeah,
more than anything else.
but the thing is that they're the biggest upgrade I get is the health upgrade and the more death defying things, which I forgot to equip my lucky tooth. So
They oh well, to be fair though, like they kind of add up like
yeah.
surprisingly fast.
Hmm.
So as I'm playing Immortals Phoenix Rising on my own in the background, I literally just gave up on this puzzle. And I don't even care. I don't care. I just googled the puzzle.
That's fair. Always pet
I'm a
best
bad
boy.
person. What was that?
Always pet the Cerberus.
Oh, of course. Plus you get eventually you could get a summons with Cerberus. I don't know if you've gotten to summons yet.
Nope.
Probably not. But if you keep giving him nectar and petting him, you can get a summons from Cerberus. Yeah, so
He's
the
like,
solution,
I'm gonna.
as I'm looking this up, it says a solution is on a wall behind the puzzle.
Oh,
I don't know what they're referring to.
it's an open air like construct. It's like a.
I don't know. All I'm saying is that I just Googled this puzzle solution and I feel no guilt. I don't even care. I'm slightly annoyed I couldn't figure it out, but I'm not guilty.
Right.
My words convict me.
In what's that
The
game?
shame of having to look up a puzzle in Immortals Phoenix Rising. We'll get to that eventually, but honestly, there's a lot to talk about with Hades because it's a game that's worth discussing, I think.
Hmm.
So Hades, like I think people exaggerate the writing quality. However, I don't think they exaggerate the game's quality, like as a whole. Hades is really good. Like it's really good. I've r- greatly enjoy Hades.
Yep. Hades is its gameplay loop is amazing. It's almost as good as Risk of Rain 2's gameplay loop. Like to compare, uh, Ken, you can join us on chat if you want to. Just leave the
Yes,
YouTube open so we get.
you've played Hades, so you have a perspective.
So Hades I've played for 9 hours so far. To compare against Risk of Rain and Risk of Rain 2, Risk of Rain 2 I've played 240 hours, um, and Risk of Rain 1 just 88 hours. But I feel that that's really low compared to my memory of it. Uh, in comparison, uh, I'm looking up some other ones. Like I've played. Yeah, only how much? I've played about 10 hours of Bioshock 2. See, some of these things is like I played and I beat them, but I didn't beat them on my Steam account, so there's no proof. Like Skyrim, I have about 250 hours on Skyrim, uh, but I've never actually beaten Skyrim. In fact, you could say that like I've never really gotten past like the first half of the main quest, just because. And I'm not even
Well,
joking.
'cause Skyrim is a massive game. I've never been a fan of Skyrim, to be honest. I've tried it because
No,
I know a ton of people like adore Skyrim.
I keep getting
I'm
glitches. That's the problem.
oh
So like,
really?
yeah.
It doesn't have a reputation as a glitchy game, to my knowledge. That's
Oh,
odd.
yes, it does. It's
Does it?
it's
Does it
it's
really?
it's famously glitchy. Um, like it's not as bad as everyone says. By the way, 63 hours on Left 4 Dead 1. Uh, as everyone says.
Oh, I have hundreds of hours in Left 4 Dead 2. You know what the interesting thing is about the Left 4 Dead games? So, installing Left 4 Dead on my crappy laptop literally takes up like all of my data if I want to use it, and even then, like it'll kick me out of the game sometimes because my laptop's so crap.
Yeah.
Uh, and this is an old game now, and it'll do this, but whatever. So, the thing about Left 4 Dead 2 and the original Left 4 Dead, we also have an Xbox at our house, and I decided I wanted to get Left 4 Dead for the Xbox so I could play it a little bit easier. I can't play it with my friends then, but whatever. So I bought the original Left 4 Dead because I found it like really cheap. That was the only reason I picked that over Left 4 Dead 2. And one thing that I noticed very quickly is that there is actually a huge difference between Left 4 Dead and Left 4 Dead 2. Like,
Yes.
much larger than I would have guessed. Like, Left 4 Dead 2 is, I think, the mechanics of Left 4 Dead 2 are much better, but the map design of the original Left 4 Dead, worlds better. Like, no comparison. It's so easy to get lost wandering around the new Left 4 Dead 2 maps.
Yep. They're not as bad as everyone says, in my opinion. But like, if you don't know where you're going, it can cause you some troubles.
Some of the ending maps, like the scavenger maps and whatever, are fantastic. Like, I love those new missions, but honestly, I think the best Left 4 Dead experience is Left 4 Dead 1 maps and Left 4 Dead 2 gameplay. See, the thing is that for the Xbox, I had to pay for DLC to get the Left 4 Dead 1 maps on Left 4 Dead 2. But if you're doing it on Steam, like you could just download it, and I think the reason for that is that Valve realized that people could just mod it anyway if they wanted to.
Yep.
So there was no point in locking it out because people would just make it and post it. But on the Xbox, they could get away with that shit a little bit better.
Like, no, they could literally copy paste the whole thing into SFM and just remake it. Like, it's not it
Yeah.
like it's not even that.
By the way, the mods are the best part of Left 4 Dead.
Oh yeah, like I remember playing through the not Minas Tirith. What's that one?
Helm's Deep map.
Helm's Deep
Oh
map.
yeah.
There was also a map that was the Mines of Moria. That was really
Yep.
fun, even though we never really got past like the first bit of it because we kept team killing each other, which is the classic maneuver.
Well, I've never played like those versus games. I never found this fun. I prefer the Left 4 Dead campaign, and even then, they're like full fan campaigns, of course. But
I'm not enjoying the
the
gun.
the adamant rail.
Yeah.
That's interesting because the gun actually got some criticism
Why?
for I don't know. People just didn't like. Some people just didn't like how it played. However, as Ken points out, speedrunners do tend to use the gun. But I have noticed that when there are polls on best weapon, the winner is generally crossbow, which is probably my least favorite. I have won the game. I've won with every weapon multiple times at this point. I have won the game with the crossbow once. And I'm also only won with the shield once, and I intend to never play with them again now that I've actually beaten it with them.
So
I mean,
they haven't
it
even.
depends on the moons, of course, that you get with it, but I just find it the least fun to use.
I dig it. I haven't seen the crossbow yet. So I've got everything but So I've gotten the bow, which was the last pedestal. Sorry, the gun, which was the last pedestal on my thingamabob in my weapons room.
Yeah, I gotcha.
So it's like, I guess another one will show up eventually. I do like the
What?
bow. So the biggest problem I have with this game is how weird all the interpersonal relationships are. Like, sure, dialogue is kind of tough to write for people, with say, shall we say, very few friends. It's cold and lonely and dark, and there's no one to help me fight the wolves. Um, the um, how do I want to put it? Like, sure, for the amount of dialogue that's actually there, it's absolutely amazing that so much of it is this good, because it doesn't really have a right to be as good as it is. But like the inter character like dynamics just bothers me. Like, especially Zeus's relation. I mean, sorry. Well, yeah, Hades' relationship with Zeus, and Hades' relationship with his son. Like, they didn't write them in a way with any heart to them. They just kind of wrote him in this like super aggressive, disapproving dad sort of way, which I can understand why, and it's why I kind of like you know oh, there it is. Agree with Ken on the it's a gay metaphor, um, in both meanings of the word gay, and not the happy one. So there's three meanings of the word gay: homosexual, uh, happy, and then the third one, which is gay. Um, and it's two of them. I won't have you. You can guess which ones. I'm sure. Um,
I can, yes.
yeah. Hmm.
I
And
dig it.
and so it's like so they go with the whole disapproving route. Like when Hades is actually like one of the most reasonable gods of the pantheon. Like he does.
Well, the thing is that once you play through the game, Hades actually is somewhat reasonable, like comparative to the other Olympic gods.
Sure.
I would say that Hades does come off as reasonable. So there's a mystery with, what happened to Persephone. And if you pay another thing is that if you pay attention, this one you really need to be paying attention to like specifically what they're saying. But you'll notice that they rework the relationships between the characters to get rid of like the incest stuff that's always there.
They do
For
that.
example, what was that?
A lot of places do that. It's weird.
Well, it makes sense, I guess, if you want the characters to be somewhat likable. Like Hera is Zeus's sister.
Yep. Older sister.
So yeah. So if you pay attention, to the dialogue in Hades, he'll mention it with Demeter as well. Demeter actually says at one point that Zeus started calling me like his older sister, even though we weren't actually related or something like that, or we didn't have the same mother. You know,
Which
and you'll hear stuff like that.
yeah.
However, he is still Zeus, Hades, and Poseidon are still siblings in this.
Yep.
And Hades also, if you pay attention, really hates Zeus, which is funny to me.
Well, there's a lot of resentment. Like one of the things I've read and I've seen with people like who write this stuff, sort of like the lefty ideology, gay fantasy sort of thing. Like their resentment is all over the place. Have you noticed that?
What? Just that it's very bitter.
Yeah. Like it's always more bitter, it's always more resentful than it should be. And it's like, sometimes people like say, well, this, that, or the other thing, and people were complaining online when I've never actually heard a complaint online about this game or its portrayal of characters. I'm sure if I dug deep, I could find one, but like,
There has been no. Uh, Hades is a much beloved game by both
Right.
players and critics, and deservedly so, by the way. Even with my gripes with the writing, and I do agree with you that there are some, uh, it is, it deserves to be as well liked as it is.
Yeah. Like, how do I want to put it? Like, I could sort of pick up on the nature of the author and sort of like the focus the lead designer and so on was putting into it from the dialogue and the writing and how characters resent each other. Like
So,
when I was told the
Zagreus and Hades, as the story goes on, though, one thing that makes this notable is that they do kind of repair their relationship. If you look in the kitchen or like the diner of the House of Hades when they have their little employee of the month thing,
yeah
eventually, after a long enough period of time and enough story events have happened, and I say this only because you say you don't care about getting spoiled,
yeah
but eventually Zagreus does get up on the wall.
ooh, that's worth it.
And Hades said, like, Hades will eventually say, "I'm proud of you, son," at some point, so you make up.
Right, but it's like
Like,
I'm sort of more complaining about like how it is like now. Like I'm not worried about the future because I assume that because of the fantasy that like I'm picking up on, he will come around and admit that he was wrong and that his son was right, etc., etc. At least that's what it feels like. Um,
yes.
and you telling me these things is entirely unsurprising to me for the simple reason is because that's how a non-hack would write it. But even then, it's still very, very hacky in its sort of feel to
You
it.
have to remember, it is a video game, too, and it's concerned with being a game first. So you'll get these forced, you know, things like why is Zagreus, for example, at the end of the game, why is he still making escape attempts on the underworld? Well, the canonical answer to this question is that Hades is using you as like a security officer, kind of like, you help
Yeah.
highlight security flaws. But that doesn't really make sense if you think about it.
No.
And however, you get why they do it. You do it because it's a video game.
Right. You can't just end the game of something like this and go, well, you're a literal god, but hey, good game this time around, boys. And it's like that's it. Like please, I'm used to playing Hideo Kojima games. Don't taunt me on this. Hmm.
So yeah, you can play it, and there's also an epilogue that I haven't reached, and when I've tried to look up what it is, because my understanding is that it's extremely convoluted to get to. So, and I haven't been able to find information on like what specifically happens in it. But eventually, what happens is, you have to beat the game 10 times, and Persephone will join you in the underworld then, which
Oh,
is
okay.
kind of.
Yeah.
But I don't know. That's not the epilogue.
Right. That's
I don't
just
know that's just considered the ending. I don't know what happens in the epilogue.
okay. I honestly I haven't even beaten the game yet, so it's like it's still like kind of there. As I've gotten as far as the Temple of Styx, where some satyrs poison me to death. Um,
Gotta watch out for that, man. Gotta stay by the health potions.
yep. Which
Those
is
health potions will save you.
oh yeah, absolutely.
I say as I'm currently in Phoenix Rising, trying to finish a vault.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway,
So with my sort of point about real life, if people aren't careful, what they'll do is they'll assume that important things that are happening to them should be in their writing, which is absolutely not true. Um, that may sound callous, but it's like
that's absolutely correct.
uh, you just don't like people's care for other people is actually way lower than you think it is. Um, like,
Well, the thing is that people say this, and then people get depressed about it, or they get, bitter about it, or
yeah,
whatever. From where I'm standing, there's really no judgment here. Like, it doesn't make anybody better or worse. It is what it is. People just don't care.
yeah,
This is my issue, with people who are wondering, like, who complain about how unfair the world is. And the answer is that, like, people just don't care. It's not even really a matter of how fair or unfair is the world so much as, like, people aren't being malicious about it. We just have a
no,
limited capacity to care. You know, life is only so long.
yep. And it's like,
So,
mm,
like, for example, with we'll use Pinkerton's Ghost as an example. If we were to stop producing Pinkerton's Ghost this week and go on a 6-month hiatus with absolutely no warning in advance, and then we were to put out a long thing explaining in detail that, like, we, all got cancer and our children died or something, like, this is an exaggerated example, but my point is that wouldn't matter. We'd still lose the viewers.
yep,
And it's not because people are unsympathetic when bad things happen. It's not because the excuse isn't good, because the excuse, of course, would be illness and family tragedy, which is the best excuse. It's that people have a limited capacity in their lives to care so much about other people. There's no point in being bitter about it. It is what it is.
yep. And that's the important thing. Like, to to live one's life like always seeking pity, it just doesn't work. Like, I could, live my my dad was in the hospital. Oh, this that, he nearly, what was it? It was an MRSA infection in the leg. Hey, that's sad. Um, Not much we can do about that though. You know, these these things are what they are. They've been what they are, and they'll be what they are tomorrow morning. I'm still gonna hit the gym Monday. I'm still going to finish up Pinkerton's Ghosts, the two things I have to edit tonight, which I should have gotten done, yesterday and the day before that, but I just wasn't feeling it. Sure, it's a reasonable excuse. Anyone's like, dude, your father's in the hospital and you're beating yourself up because you couldn't edit two things, and you weren't late for David's guest episode, which turned out amazing. But it's like,
It did.
no. Ultimately, Keats wrote poetry while dying of consumption. These people who I well, I don't really look up to Keats, but these people I look up to, you know, more or less died for these these things, and I'm complaining about something else. I'm complaining that, in the house where I live, with the warmth again, well, I'm not going to say it's warm in here, but, the medical attention my dad's get that would have otherwise made him lose a leg or his life, all these different things. Um, you know, Ultimately, I could have had it done, and I just didn't. Instead, I read old webcomics and just kind of stared at the screen for 6 hours.
Right. And the question here, like, this is something, and I've made people mad at me by, like, pointing this out to them, and I'm trying to say, like, please understand. I'm not saying this in a personal way. I'm not saying that your excuse isn't good, or that you don't have a good, or that you don't have a good reason, or even that I blame you. Like, I'm not saying I blame anybody for this.
Right.
What I'm saying is it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like, I haven't written for years because X, Y, and Z happened. That's great. You still haven't written anything.
Yep.
Yeah. So I'm sorry to hear that. Nobody cares. Yeah. Pinkerton's Ghost isn't done this week because, I don't know. I got too busy. Maybe I had a great excuse. It might be a great excuse. Maybe the people who I'm working with are very understanding of it, but the audience doesn't care.
Oh, I wouldn't be understanding at all. But it's like looks like I'm gonna have to get the sister to
Cough,
uh,
cough.
was that?
Yeah, like maybe they would be understanding of it when it inevitably. Uh,
Right. Right. So understanding it completely. And then you see me. I'll be more understanding after we're done here, as I chain you to the wall. Uh, Listen, Anthony. This is an ancient Edgar Allan Poe tier recipe for authors who don't produce. Sometimes I tie myself to the wall. I hide a key in there, and I have to kind of dig through my documentation and finish it up. Else I, starve to death in my basement. But it's how you roll.
I'm so annoyed by this. I'm supposed to retrieve a tear of Aphrodite, but where am I retrieving it? Aha, here it is.
I wouldn't trust any tears by Aphrodite at all.
So the joke in Phoenix Rising is that Aphrodite has been it's been turned into a tree and separated from her essence. And this is like an actual joke, by the way.
Yeah.
So the idea is that now she's like really sweet and nice, and apparently you're trying to find her tears so that you could dry up the roots of the tree, and in theory this will free her or something, whatever. But the idea is then like once she gets her essence back, she becomes really bitchy.
I expected nothing less
Immortal
from Aphrodite.
Rising is, we'll get to it because it's Greek mythology as well, but it's has like a lot of puzzles and things like that. It's a comedy game though, first and foremost, where Hades is not. So Hades, as far as the quality of the writing goes, one thing that's very, very impressive about Hades is that the sheer amount of dialogue and dialogue cues. Like they have a dialogue cue for almost everything that happens in the game,
Yep.
which is great. Like unironically, not at all sarcastic. That's really impressive that they have that, and generally it works very well.
Oh yeah. Like the work. Like none of us are like I'm not when I talk about these things that I'm noticing about these characters working, interacting and stuff like that. The craftsmanship is still absolutely amazing. Like
It's
it's
a beautiful game too, with a killer soundtrack.
absolutely. Unfortunately, I am not playing the soundtrack.
Yeah, well, because you're doing this, but
Pax Romana says, "I wrote my episode when I had COVID. I will never be sympathetic, Anthony." Pax Romana, admittedly, it was one of my weaker episodes, of course. Which one was that? Was that Is it the one I'm doing now? I don't know.
so I don't know. I'm never sure what really is one of my stronger, my weaker episodes. I have my own opinions of what I personally like and dislike of what I've written, but I have no idea what other people think. So
Yeah.
when God Robot came out, I wrote two short stories for it called Cover Up and Modified. That was it. And I worked really, really hard on Modified, and and I don't think that anybody cared about it, and I considered it like by far the superior story. But whenever anybody mentioned either of my stories, which wasn't often, by the way, because they
You,
were the weakest stories in God Robot, but
you were next to
whenever
John C. Wright and Vox Day and others, and it's like,
yeah,
hey, how come nobody's noticing me? It's like a little guy trapped in between two giant bodybuilders. It's like,
well, yeah, I knew exactly why nobody noticed me. But with that said,
senpai.
whenever I thought of it, like I worked really hard on one of the stories. I was like quoting philosophers and doing all of this stuff to resolve it. And the other one I dashed together, and I didn't think the solution really worked. But whenever anybody mentioned it to me, they always thought that Cover Up was the better story. Yeah, they and hey, I'm glad that anybody mentioned it at all. But at the same time, that's not what I would have figured. would have stood out to people. So I have no idea. Now, as far as my own stories go, like I wasn't overly happy when I first wrote. I think that all of my stories have come out fine so far for Pinkerton's Ghost. As published, I think they've all turned out pretty good.
Yep.
But my favorite of them is probably For the Man Who Has Nothing, which is not a horror story. It's a feel good. I think you put it on the on the page title, like it's a feel good Christmas story.
Christmas horror. So I've been playing
Yeah,
around
feel
with the titles
horror.
just to figure out like what works and what won't work and what won't. And it's like,
What
yeah,
the
sure.
YouTube algorithm likes.
Yeah. Just because it's like, yeah, why not? Like the thing is that like it's all part of experimentation. Like I want to know things like why choose say Greek mythology? Well, it's famous. Okay, well I guess the real question is why does Greek mythology, work so well in writing and poetry and stuff like that where other groups just don't do it? Like it's pretty surprising. Like
So
you
the most common that I see pop up, it goes, Greek slash Roman, because the Romans just stole everything from the Greeks.
yeah, they did.
And yeah,
Barbarians.
Greek slash Roman, and then followed by like Egyptian probably.
Yeah, like there's an element of
Norse
Egyptian.
as well. I'll also give Norse. I'll put Norse in there.
I think it would go something like well, like if we're talking all the mythologies, it would be like Greece, Chinese, Norse, Egyptian, I guess.
And I'm talking about like the most popular that I've seen, used by writers and whatever, that sort of thing. What do I see used most often by writers? I mean, outside of Greek slash Roman, it probably goes somewhere. I see Norse very often, and I see Egyptian very often. Uh, every now and then, Babylonian will pop up, but generally, when Babylonian pops up, it's not in any sort of even semi-accurate way. It's just people
Right,
stealing names.
right. Got to get
Because
that Ishtar in there.
yeah, because Babylonian names sound intimidating,
Oh
which is
yeah,
fine, by the way. I don't really have a problem with that, but people will tend to try and be at least semi-accurate when they're talking, Norse and Egyptian and Greek and all of that.
right,
But Babylonian, for some reason, people don't really seem to care.
right.
I don't know why. I also see Aztec pop up occasionally. Mostly, I think, because the Aztecs were one of the most sadistic and brutal societies of all time.
Right. But it's so metal. Like there it's like yes, and then he took his flayed skin and like or something ridiculous like that, just because it's like yeah, absolutely. You got to like uh melt a
So
few gods to make a new world.
I had a professor in college, a myth and culture professor, who I liked quite a bit, by the way. But she would always she always got annoyed when people talked about Aztec mythology because she's like, people just all people talk about is the human sacrifice. If there was nothing else to that culture, but I would always respond like, while I get what
There
you're
was
saying,
nothing else besides the human
well,
sacrifice.
no, like, while I get what you're saying to a point, isn't that, isn't it kind of reasonable that that's what people will hyper focus on? Like,
Yeah.
doesn't it sort of make sense that that's the part that people fixate on? I
Yeah.
if you re- I used to watch every now and then. Like I didn't watch a lot of it, but like I don't know if you know Hardcore History.
Yeah.
What's his name? Carlin?
George Carlin or something. Dan Carlin?
Dan Carlin? Yeah,
Yeah.
George Carlin's the comedian. Dan Carlin, maybe.
And
So
famous
Hardcore
pervert.
History. Uh, I have no idea if the dude's a lefty or not. He probably is, but I couldn't tell.
I
So
think so.
hey, yeah, he probably is, but I couldn't tell. So points for that, I guess. I just assume he is because everybody who gets popular and has a political perspective and isn't explicitly on the right is on the left. Like, if they're not explicitly on the right, then they're almost certainly on the left.
Yep.
So probably a lefty. But I couldn't tell, so that's a compliment to him. But anyway, he had a thing where he was talking about like Genghis Khan, and like he said that when he was in college, like I forget if he said if it was him or if it was somebody he knew, like wrote a paper on Genghis Khan, the contributions that he had, and his professor like responded to the paper with like all of the good things that Genghis Khan is like. He killed however many million people. And then
Oh
I would
yeah.
go, well, no, you're missing the point. Like, yes, he did, but he still did all of this stuff. You can't take that away.
Yep.
However, Carlin's point is a good one, and he's right. Like, you always remember whenever you're talking about when ever you're talking about I'm trying to think of the word. When you're talking about historical figures, I guess,
Yep.
conquerors like Alexander, for example, it's important to remember Alexander killed people,
Oh yeah.
a lot of people.
Oh yeah.
He started it. So,
I wouldn't say he started all of
no, he didn't. He didn't start all of it. But with that said,
it.
like he did not start all of it technically.
Technically.
But to say to act like Alexander was just some great historical force sweeping through, I think is Carlin's point.
Right.
Like that's not really true, is it?
No. Like he was honestly, he is like the ultimate experience of affluenza. His daddy basically built everything he ever would use, and then he used it to conquer the world. Um, and there's even some debate, like who had
Now,
Philip of Macedon assassinated and so on and so forth. But I don't actually cotton to Alexander doing it. Um,
so one thing to be fair to Alexander, Carlin said something on there where it's like, they go, he spread Greek, what are the pros and cons? Go, people would say as a pro, like, he spread Greek culture. And then go, he didn't spread Greek culture, he conquered places.
Yep.
Like, there's a difference. However, to be fair to Alexander, as my sister pointed out when she heard this, Alexander was definitely spreading Greek culture. Like, the spreading of Greek culture was not a side effect. It was very much like the point of what he was doing.
Yep.
It was very intentional.
Yep. It like and so here's the thing though, for Alexander, above Genghis Khan and others, is that there's a very strong element of God willed that he succeeded. It may sound very strange to people to hear that, but like there is an absolute crap ton of biblical prophecy just supporting that this guy was tailor made to take care of business. You know what I mean? And spread the world because
Alexander
the
specifically? That's
yes.
interesting. I haven't heard of Alexander.
So
Cyrus, I've heard.
Cyrus, a lot of people kind of go like, um, hey, Cyrus did all this, all that. While Cyrus did have it, his purpose wasn't so much towards Christendom as it was preserving the Jews.
Well, yes, but at the time there was no Christendom. He's the only Gentile in the Bible to be referred to as Messiah. Most Bibles translate it as anointed one, but it's the same, the same translation,
So
same word.
I get you. What I mean more of, so what I'll be more clear. Christendom couldn't have Christianity could not have spread without Alexander conquering the known world.
I get you.
The reason why it's different. So I saw someone comment, was Greece just an extension of the East rather than the beginnings of the West? The answer is no, and that's even a dumb take. There are fundamental differences in the west that basically help propagate and create differences that cannot be matched by the more sedate, more group level East. There's a mouse in my house and it thinks it's clever. So, and I'm going to explain it. Wherever the Greeks went, they spread their language and culture. And that created, even though the Romans and the Persians were a thing, the Sassanids and the Parthians, even though, and the Seleucids, yeah, Seleucids, Parthians, and Sassanids, um, even though them and the Romans were completely separate entities, they still shared enough of a culture that they could communicate with each other. And that they had tons of trade, and that they interacted with each other and intermarried, and occasionally murdered each other viciously. Um, because there was that connection that was more than just two countries next to each other that hate each other, a la Britain and France. Christian missionaries could cross over state boundary lines and spread the gospel incredibly easily. If you knew Greek, there wasn't a single person from Spain to India, like India itself, who would not. There wouldn't be someone who didn't understand you. You could not walk into a city from, you know, easily 10,000 mile area, tip to tip, that you could not talk and be understood. And even beyond then, there were traders that plied everywhere from India and China to, Ireland. Even beyond that, if some of the stuff that we've seen are to be believed, they might have even gone as far as the Americas. Um, but they could have also been artifacts that the Vikings kept on them. There's a whole bunch of debate, but occasionally you find like Roman artifacts buried in East Coast settlements. Um, it's very rare though. Like I've only heard of it happening like 3 times. Um, there's all these different things that could happen, and without that monoculture, Christianity couldn't have spread as fast as it did. Paul was a Roman citizen and a Jew. He was a Roman citizen because he was from Tarsus, which was one of the major cities they granted citizenship to, so that they could tax them. Ha ha. And in a backwater like Israel, contentious, almost always rioting, that sort of thing, he actually used it to flex on the Roman garrison by saying, "I am a natural-born Roman citizen." Now, he wasn't an Italian or a Roman in the sense of what I would call a Roman, but he was part of the political system, and he was a higher class than others. When he appealed to Caesar, he was given his appealment, even though it led directly to his death and martyrdom. Again, that was the monoculture talking. Because of Roman roads and Roman jurisprudence and Roman armies, there were times when a woman could cross most of the Roman Empire with her children and not be molested. Um, and there are very few times like that. There were some times during the Roman Empire, the High Middle Ages, um, parts of like the 18th century, that sort of thing, when the Europeans weren't trying to kill each other constantly. In America, during the last century, um, and even then that's kind of debatable, but it was better than a lot of other things. That level of peace is is almost remarkable. And Christianity, even though Rome was eternally at war with somebody during all those years, even during their greatest empire days, they were still constantly fighting the Germans, um, which they
It's
never.
always the Germans.
Always the Germans. Germans always ruin things, making up words for new degenerate sins, unheard of in heaven or hell. It's funny because like I was making a comment that English sins are more perfidious than German sins because we do not make names for them, so it's harder to take them down. But the Germans will proudly name their new, scatological fetish that involves three midgets and a monkey, or something stupid like that, because that's how they did it. Um, Germans. Uh, so
All of
yeah,
this said, like, I take Carlin's point, though. The idea being basically that there's this tendency with modern history to try and look at things dispassionately. And while I appreciate it to an extent as well,
yep,
like, the idea that you can just divorce the fact that, Genghis Khan killed however many millions of people, or Alexander wept because he conquered so many worlds, from the fact that they spread this culture, is you can't really do that. They they did something. What they did affected the people they did it to, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
yes. There's the the importance of how of like when people say something like immigration equals war or something like that, it's not from like a zero sum idea that doesn't come from nowhere. Wherever the Greeks went from like a bunch of piss poor islands and peninsulas in the Aegean to world conquerors, they did so practically overnight. Um, I was listening. David Halquist linked me the Opus Mutiny speech, which hey, they don't actually know if he said anything like that, but there was the Opus Mutiny where basically he was going to send some of his old and wounded soldiers home, rich as kings, and because of all the loot and stuff like that. And everyone's like, "Why don't we all go home?" And he's like, guys, I'm just sending these home for. I've paid your debts even though I pay you well enough and you loot every city we take. I've got the same scars as you. I've stood watches the same as you. Like, to
Yeah,
have.
I will say this to Alexander's credit is that he was very highly respected uh,
Oh, they.
by both his enemies and his own men, although, like, they had the mutiny and whatever, but for the most part.
Yeah, but that's just typical soldier BS. Like, they always want more pay, more time off, more women, more food. Like it never actually ends for these guys. So you just kind of have to let it ride and bribe them a bit, make them happy. Um, but it's you know, it's not quite. How do I want to put it? Like, if you're like a general and you're trying to get things done and whatnot, like bribing the soldiers is entirely uh, a reasonable and plausible choice to make. Like one of the things that with all the arguments about like the money we want to get and the stimulus checks is like, listen guys, we are not a virtuous enough people to reject the government giving us handouts. Let's take what we can because you're paying into it anyway.
Right.
And like people will be like, "Oh,
So,
you're communist or whatever." It's like, no, you don't get it. We are all plebs. I might have been in the country for 400 years through my family, from the founding of some of the cities in Maryland and stuff like that. But that doesn't make me any sort of patrician. It just makes me a very long-lived pleb, family wise. Why not take what's offered? Like it's all going to crap anyway. Let's like we're like let's be real. We're gonna see a dictator in our lifetimes.
I dig it.
Will Texas stand up to it? Probably, but they're being inundated with Californians who are voting in the same policies they always vote for. I just read something that the Dallas police will no longer be answering domestic disputes. Like, in Dallas, like, how do you live in a state like that and still call yourselves, a civilized people? All that means is a bunch of women and some wimpy men are going to get beat more often, and all kinds of things like that. Like, civilization, we're not virtuous enough to resist. We're not virtuous enough to resist anything. You might as well carve out what's yours and live a virtuous Christian life. We're not part of the government. We're part of Christ's kingdom. And that's, like, while we would want a virtuous government, misnomer, while we would want all these things that people talk about these days, the Greeks understood their gods better than we understand our politicians. And we call them slime bags to their face. Like, they're just people. It's all just people all the way down, and if they're giving out bread and circuses, let's take the bread and circuses and then try to make some money out of it.
One of the things about the Greek gods is that, by the way, Ken left. He had a few things to say. He pointed out, "Man Who Has Nothing" is an excellent story, not a good horror, great fantasy, and it's a wonderful life tribute. I appreciate that. He also said technically Egyptian mythology is rarely used properly because it is wildly perverted, and it's the Greek tame by comparison. Well, yeah, so incest was a big thing in Greek mythology, and in fact it was, Egyptian mythology.
Yep.
And in fact it was such a big thing that, unlike in Greek mythology where the incest was normally just kind of ignored because they needed it to make the pantheon work, you wanted the 12 Olympians to be the sons of the most powerful gods and the primordial beings, which means inevitably they're going to have to be siblings. Unlike the Greeks, who just kind of ignored it, the Egyptians leaned hard into it, and it actually became like a sticking point at the fall of with the fall of the pharaohs, that the Ptolemaic line had to start marrying their siblings in order to look legitimate in the eyes of the people. This was a big deal. So pretty messed up.
Oh, yeah.
So Ken is technically correct. However, I don't think that's what most people mean. And
it's not what people always think about.
Both of those things are quite true. But what I was going to say is that one thing that is important to remember when it comes to the Greeks and their gods is that I'm trying to think of how to put it. We need to be very careful not to assume that they looked at their gods the same way that we do. For example, the Zeus is an asshole theory, is, I guess, call it a theory, whatever you want to, has become very in vogue lately.
Yep.
But I am not convinced at all that the Greeks themselves would have seen it that way.
I agree with you.
So, I remember reading in it, I forget where I read this, but it was a question somebody asked: was Zeus considered a good king by the Greeks? And the answer was yes. Actually, Zeus was considered a great king by the Greeks. He was considered the pinnacle of what a king should be. So, for example, we look at Zeus and we go, he raped X, Y, and Z. That's a very modern idea. That was an idea that would have been completely foreign to the Greeks. The idea that Zeus could rape anybody because he's Zeus. He had the right because he was Zeus.
Yeah.
Even if you didn't know it was Zeus, you might be upset at first, but once you learned it was Zeus, then you better get over it because it's Zeus.
Yep.
And sure, Hera has a right to be upset, but only Hera has a right to be upset. And even Hera, how upset she's allowed to get is very limited. Because she's not Zeus.
Yep.
like it's one of those things I think that people don't always quite understand what that means. The fact that what being Zeus means, I guess.
Yeah. Like so there's there's an element of charisma that I think I don't get, and other people don't get. Like back when I was working for Club Fitness, I had an absolute Chad as a boss, a literal Chad. He had the chin and everything. Women were literally sending him nudes, including coworkers. Like as part of my character arc, I've realized that I did nothing that he and other more charismatic and handsome people were doing themselves. Even though it was a very toxic thing I did, the toxicity was all the way all over the place.
Was
So
turtles all the way down?
it was turtles all the way down. It was like the lowest tier of my workers were dating each other. The people above me were dating each other. So when I dated one of my employees, it was like, nope, nope, that's too far, Ben. But what about all the no, Ben? It's like, all right, that's fine. You're right. I fooled around and I got bit. But it's I was in the wrong. But what was part of it was that there was nobody who was basically saying, Zeus, stop sleeping around. Like if I said, "Hey man, don't stop talking to somebody like that," you should really stop having her send, stop her from sending you nudes. Well, but why? Or like, like that was basically his interaction. I'm like, "Hey man, I know you're friends with this one chick, but you got to be careful how it looks like to other people. We have all these problems with Jason and other people dating each other. Like it was like one of those things that progressed. Eventually, I got yelled at for being too hard on everyone. Like, and this is true. Like, it wasn't yelling, but the boss was scary. And it was like, okay, and it
That's
was
hilarious.
and like so I stopped having all this discipline, and I stopped interacting with people's personal lives, and I said, okay dude, anything goes, I don't care, just get the work done. And it was like talking to him was like, what do you mean not talking to this girl I want to screw uh you know is wrong, or is something I shouldn't be doing for the advantage of other people. And it got to the point in the end that people would listen to me because I would give them their assignments, but there was no leadership from him or anything else like that, because it was always um, kind of all over the place. And it was that mindset that, like, I don't understand why is the thing I'm doing wrong or whatever. It's like I don't know how to
Because
answer that.
nobody's ever told them.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, the thing about Zeus, like, I've mentioned this in the past, but there's a fantastic passage in the Iliad where, like, I forget who it was, one of the gods, Aphrodite or Hera or someone, goes up to Zeus and says, hey, I think that you should take it easy on Troy. And I don't remember if this is exactly what it was. So just,
Right.
something along these lines. Like, not first off, I like Troy. I favor them. And besides, you got to do what you wanted last time. So I think it's only fair. Now it's my turn. And Zeus, like, stops him and goes, let's hold on here a second. There is no deal here. Like there is no, because I got something, you get something. Here's how it works. I do whatever I want to because I'm Zeus. And then if I decide to be nice, then you could get what you want. But only then. Like there's no deal. There's no, agreement between us. Like, and he goes, with that said, I will grant your request. But I want you to remember that I am granting your request because I want to, not because I owe you. I don't owe anybody anything. I'm Zeus. you
Right.
know, I'm the king. I make the decisions. Is that understood? the other thing too is that, like, for the Greeks, the idea of there being a more powerful god than Zeus, like, there wasn't. There was nobody more powerful than Zeus.
Yep. Like someone like Typhon could give him a real run for his money, but like the second Zeus gets a fair fight against him, he's not, he's not gonna. Typhon's gonna go down. Like it's gonna go down
It's
hard.
funny you say that. Typhon is the villain of Phoenix Rising.
Yeah, I was actually so like let's chat real quick about like who we wanted to see in those games. Why does nobody do a good Hector like in these games? Like I am a big fan of
Yeah,
Hector. Like Achilles is like,
Hector is just not in it.
yeah, I
Like,
know.
he's not mentioned at all.
And it's like weird because like I guess like Achilles is more famous as in like you can advertise off of him better, but it's like
Heracles is also not in it.
I know like it's like he's mentioned several times, but it's like the people
So
who are and aren't in it I don't understand.
there's a joke with Theseus. The reason that you fight Theseus, I don't know if you've gotten this bit of dialogue yet. You might have. But there's a little bit of a joke with Theseus that the reason that he's the one that you fight is because he's the only one who was willing to do it because he's such like an arrogant blowhard.
Right. I actually like
Yeah.
like for somebody who isn't used to dealing with chads, like I've looked at their dialogue. Like he's not nearly as bad as people say about him. Like
It's more that he's obnoxious and he's really funny, I think.
yeah, he is, but
I
like
think he's hilarious.
he falls under like he acts like the chads I've seen. Like he half bullies, half like interacts with Asterius and like does all this stuff and it's like yeah, of course. He's
They
acting
have a they have like a little mini character arc that's hilarious because Zagreus keeps like trying to tells Asterius like, that Theseus guy, he's an asshole, but you, I don't understand. Why do you work with him? And he kind of says like, Theseus pulled me out. I was in like the realm of the monsters, and Theseus basically pulled me out. Which is the reason I work with him. And then Theseus gets like paranoid that you're trying to steal Asterius away from him. And Zagreus is like, yeah, I'm not doing that. But with that said, if you're bringing it up, the offer is out there. It's like, hey, you can work with me if you want. And then Asterius eventually goes like, Theseus gets kind of petulant about it. And then eventually Asterius is like, look, I'm not going to leave you, Theseus. Like, can you please stop worrying about this? And there's actually like a sort of semi-touching kind of mini character arc. And Zagreus hears them like resolve this, where he's like, "Oh, Asterius, my friend, you." And he goes, "I knew you would never leave me." And Zagreus is just there going, I'm glad you worked that out, I guess." And then they try and kill him.
right.
Yeah.
As you do.
And Zagreus there going like, I guess I'm glad you guys worked that out."
That's pretty fantastic. Honestly, like people say things like Theseus was a jerk, and there were times when like legitimately, even like changing it around, there are some things that I go, I don't know about that guy. Like it doesn't seem like there's like his thing isn't that Theseus is nice, is that Theseus is very clever, and he can outsmart and outthink and all this stuff his foes. Um,
I thought that was more supposed to be Odysseus.
yes, but also no. So Odysseus' secret superpower outside the Trojan War is that the gods love him and hate him. Like that's it. That's his only power.
I suppose. Like, they mention clever Odysseus all the time, though.
Yeah, no, he's smart, but like, if you how do I want to do it? If you look at some of Theseus's myths, he actually like spends most of his time outthinking his opponents, The only person he really fights is uh, the bull.
Theseus?
Yeah, most of the
Isn't he also the one who takes on Procrustes?
yeah, like he wrestles a few people, but several times he outsmarts them. Like he hides under the bed. He of this one guy who was killing his guests. Another guy, um, he like tied to a tree and then bounced the tree back like some sort of Looney Tune. And I'm not joking. Like it's pretty much um, what happened to him.
So in Phoenix Rising, see, you're playing Hades in the background. I have Phoenix Rising in the background, and I believe I am about to free Aphrodite from her tree that she is trapped in currently. Phoenix Rise. So let's bring this up now, since we've talked about Hades for a little bit, and
Yeah.
we have roughly a half hour ish to go in the show. So Immortals Phoenix Rising is a dreaded Ubisoft game.
Ubisoft.
Who I did not know that, or honestly, I probably wouldn't have gotten it. But I guess I'm glad I did because I'm enjoying it. It's just that Ubisoft's business practices are absolutely toxic,
Oh yeah.
and like the worst sort of toxic. And also, they don't make good games. They just don't. The Assassin's Creed games are okay.
They're flukes.
So, Immortals Phoenix Rising is another take on the Greek myths, and because we need another. But this is like a comedic take on the myth, and I'm really enjoying it. It's sort of like if Zelda Breath of the Wild and Assassin's Creed Odyssey had a baby. I'm going by reviews here because I've never played Breath of the Wild, but that's what they say, and that's actually what convinced me to get it because I didn't really, Breath of the Wild looked really boring to me, but what they were getting at there was that it was sort of like Odyssey, but with a real focus on like Assassin's Creed Odyssey, but with a real focus on the mythology and the magic and that sort of thing, which was exactly what I wanted Odyssey to be.
Mm-hmm.
So perfect, exactly what I wanted. And I've been really enjoying it. It's definitely in the Zeus is an asshole camp.
Dang it.
Yeah. It is definitely in the what is very popular now in modern interpretations of the Greek myths. Make Zeus an asshole. And to be fair, that's because it definitely does suggest itself very easily. When you read the myths from a modern perspective, Zeus does come off looking very bad. So that's generally how you'll see a lot of modern games interpret them. Part of it too is that Zeus is, as you pointed out, you mentioned like that you knew a Chad who, right? Like Zeus wasn't the ultimate alpha male, and almost nobody is an alpha.
Yep. Like
I
even
don't
so.
even say. I'm not even saying this nastily. I'm not even saying this in like oh, all game developers are gamma. I mean just alphas are very rare.
Yeah.
So
Even my
when you
friend is would be better considered a beta, Bravo, than an actual pure alpha.
I think betas are, if anything, even rare, even rarer than alphas.
You'd be surprised.
I almost never see betas.
So like we're talking, he was alpha in the situation that he was in, but like the way he acted was similar to how Owen Benjamin acts in some ways. How he interacted with people and treated them like family and stuff like that. He never treated people poorly. He just was constantly trying to get laid.
That's funny.
It wasn't.
It's not. Sure, it's funny in retrospect. How about that?
Yeah, it was.
From my perspective, it's funny.
Oh yeah, no, I'm just grateful that like there haven't been any lawsuits coming out of that thing, because
So the point is that when modern people read the Greek myths, not really knowing how alphas think and act and
yeah.
work, Zeus does come across looking very bad. Uh, so the whole lot with that.
No.
Uh, I mean, it has a little bit. Like Hades himself really doesn't like Zeus.
I think
Now, if you pay attention to his dialogue, like Zeus mentions at one point, "Hey, why don't you let Hades know that I totally forgive him?" And if you go and talk to Hades and like you tell him that, he'll be like, "That son of a bitch."
it's like he's
He's
done
like,
it again.
"Forgive him." Yeah, be like, "Forgive me my ass," which is pretty funny.
All right.
Uh, so in Phoenix Rising, the plot of the game is that the Cyclops monster thing, Typhon, got
Mm-hmm.
free. I think, what is he, a Titan? I think he's a Titan.
He's technically, so he's the father of monsters. Like he's a titan, but really he's like in the weight class of primeval beings.
Yeah. So he's the villain of the game, and this, excuse me, the story is that he got free and like he separated all of the gods from their essences. So Aphrodite is trapped in a tree, and she's really sweet and kind now, and she's very sad that she can't feed all of the little animals who come for her apples or whatever. And you're trying to reunite her with her essence, which I believe it's implied now, and I'm going to get there soon. I think she's going to turn into a snarky bitch, uh,
I thought
which is funny. Yes,
at least people
which is
aren't
pretty
letting
funny.
Aphrodite be, avoid the thought designation.
And Zeus and Prometheus are acting like Prometheus, with his power of foresight, is the narrator of the game. Like, he's telling Zeus everything that you, the main character, Phoenix, are doing. And, like, you're, the destined hero who's going to save the gods.
Yep.
And because I, like you, don't really care about video game twists or whatever, I looked up the story. Uh, and I believe, like, the twist is that when Phoenix gets to the island, like everybody else there has been turned to stone, and he thinks it's from Typhon, but it's actually Zeus that turned everybody to stone. And it was Typhon, and he just because he was tired of humanity and he didn't like them, and Typhon was trying to overthrow the gods. Like, see, I told you I'm not the bad guy, but you're going to be, Zeus learns like the error of his ways and whatever, that sort of thing. You know, you get the story. But it's all done in a very comedic way. Like Aphrodite being the snarky bitch, Hermes is kind of sarcastic. Uh, I think that the dialogue generally is more miss than hit. I don't
Oh.
know. I would say that the dialogue is probably worse than Hades, but not embarrassingly so.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I would give it like a C with occasional good lines here and there. It's certainly tolerable.
Yeah.
The interpretation of the gods is pretty interesting. So, it's like Zeus goes and asks Prometheus to use his gift of foresight to help, and Prometheus like makes a deal that if a human can save the gods, then he'll be freed from the eagle that's pecking out his liver for eternity, because that means that he was right to
Give him
allow
fire.
humans to exist. Yeah, I believe in the actual myths, Prometheus is like canonically actually was freed from the eagle eventually.
Uh, I think maybe Hercules did it. I'm not sure.
Yes,
Somebody did it.
yes, it was Hercules. But it's a neat interpretation of the myths. It's definitely a different take than Hades, though related in some ways. I know that I have Aphrodite as a tree, and they keep bringing up that Ares is a rooster. The only thing about the game, I
Because
do need
he's
to
a
remember
dick.
this. I know, right? Uh, the only thing that I need to remember is that it is a comedy game, because it's also like I'm not sure. what I really think of the messages, the message that the game is going for. This idea that Aphrodite as a tree is all sweet and nice and lovely, and once you reunite her with her essence, she becomes a snarky bitch. And I get what they're going for. That that one thing that makes the Greek gods notable is that they were very human with their flaws and all of that stuff. Which, fine, that's true, but is the message then that like it's better to be mean and nasty, and what Aphrodite represents shouldn't be, kindness and
Yeah.
caring? That I don't really know what they're trying to say
If you're a thought, you're a
precisely.
terrible person.
Or is it if you're not a thought, it's better to be a thought? I don't really know where they're going with this.
Right.
Same thing with Aries, where it's like, separating them from their essences seems to just turn them into better people. So it does make me wonder, like, am I really doing the right thing here?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, okay. I don't really get where they're going with this.
Right. So I just want to go back on something real quick. There seems to be two like thoughts with Zeus. Either Zeus is a dick, or Zeus is completely oblivious to all the horrible things going on around him. Which can also
Well, or you get Disney Zeus, where Zeus is a happy family man,
right,
which was, as many people pointed out, perhaps the single most inaccurate thing in that entire movie.
right, or Hera loving Hercules or any of her children. Honestly, um, being the goddess of motherhood, she kind of has a bad relationship with all of her kids.
She
Uh,
threw Hephaestus off the mountain.
because he wasn't a handsome, strong chin Chad. He was just a Wojak. He was just a Wojak that feel when your mother throws you to your death or tries to.
So honestly, the Greek versus Roman relationship with the gods is actually really interesting because, like, if you look at the myths, Ares, for example, in the Greek myths was basically always being humiliated,
Yeah.
and the Greeks had very little respect for Ares. Uh, he comes off as like a butt monkey in Greek mythology,
Yep.
and he's being mocked and made fun of more than he's, being threatening. Then when the Romans adopted, like if the Greeks needed a war god, it would be Athena.
Yep.
They would just use Athena.
Because they
But
valued
then when
cleverness over pure martial strength most times.
even Sparta had Athena as their god, not Ares,
Yep.
notably. But when the Romans took over, they like completely reworked like the cult of Mars, and Mars became like basically, the second patron god of Rome. Jupiter was the patron of Rome, but like Mars became sort of like their second patron, and he became like the second most important god in the pantheon
Yep.
under when the Romans took over. I'm not really sure how that happened or what happened there. I think it might have just been a case of they saw that the Greeks had a war god, you know,
They were
so
big on
they
syncretism compared to other groups. Um, a lot of what they did was to integrate people into the empire. They would just adopt their gods and say, "Oh, this one's like this one, this one's like this one," and like the aspect of Mars that was Ares is more like Mars Sylvanus. He was more of a god of war, agriculture, and trees as much as he was of war. Like they wanted that Mars cult so that they would have strong Roman soldiers and, not soft Aphrodite twink boy Greeks. Um,
yeah,
they're
I wonder if it was just a thing where they wanted to adopt the Greek gods, for themselves, but and they saw that the Greeks had a war god that they basically weren't using,
right.
and Romans are all about that war.
Yep. There's there's also
And
a strong element that they were sun worshippers as much as they looked to Zeus and so on and so forth. Um, partially because uh, they started before they fell to Christendom, Christianity. Uh, they were obsessed with the sun and solar deities and comparing themselves to the sun. I wonder if there's some sort of connection between a culture um, giving into sort of like solar like worship and their decay, because the Egyptians did that too, and it was fun times, so to say.
Was fun time.
Fun times. Fun times were had by all. Little do they know, Ben was a unrepentant liar. uh, so like,
But
mm,
Phoenix Rising is interesting in this case. I think compared to Hades, I think it's going for a lot of the same soap opera type elements, and it's of course interpreting the gods in their own in its own way. You know, it has a different interpretation of the gods than Hades does, and it's geared more comedic and all of that fun stuff. But at the same time, I do think that they're going for a similar thing in that anybody who uses the Greek gods tends to go with the soap opera elements.
yep, it's not hard to do that though. Like it's certainly in there. uh,
Yeah,
well, Lore Olympus is basically soap opera, Greek stuff. With a retelling of Hades and Persephone, which they always want to take out the whole like Hades is straight up kidnapping Persephone. It doesn't matter if she's okay with it. He still grabbed her, and it's like, well, Zeus arranged it so that it, because Demeter would never approve of a pairing between Persephone and Hades, and it's like it's still very strange though. Like it's like can't like it's kind of like the rape of the Sabine women. Like the Romans were such chads that the women basically said, "Yeah, all right, you know, we'll be your wives," and then convinced their husbands and brothers and fathers not to murder the Romans. Actually, no, they didn't take any. They didn't take any married women, but they took all the single ladies, all the single ladies, all the single ladies. Um, and it's like how do I want to put it, um like there's elements of culture that we just don't understand. Christianity is the only culture that does not treat women like livestock. You,
yes.
there's no other culture. In Africa, prostitution, it was like every woman was basically a prostitute. You didn't touch a married woman, but if a woman went out and she got, she saw a guy and the guy's like, "Hey, I'll give you these cowrie shells." It was done. It was done, and they considered it nothing. Um, because they had that whole weird anti-civilizational village thing going. The Japanese, the women aren't even supposed to walk in front of their men at all, or interact with much of anything. Like there's all kinds of like crazy stuff. Like they had more freedom in Japan than other places, but even then, it's like bought and sold and stuff like that. The Indians, the widow was expected to burn herself to death. The Vikings did something similar, except usually they put in a female slave instead, who they usually strangled. Um, in the Aztec women, were very little better than slaves. Chinese women, similar, and they actually, like, unlike other cultures, uh, which didn't really deform their women that much. Um, their standards of beauty, like the weird stuff they did, like the lengthening of the neck and so on and so forth, was more of a, it doesn't help their lives, but it doesn't hinder their lives either. Whereas the Chinese hobbled their women. You know, in Greece, women were the cause of every misfortune mankind ever faces. and won't let Zeus sleep around whenever he wants, which is his right. You know, like in Rome, the women had more freedom than most, uh, but also Romans didn't have a taboo about killing their own family like the Greeks did. If they wanted to, the lives of their children and their wives and daughters and so on were in their hands. Did they do it often? No. But the husband of the family could do what he wanted. You know, and I could go down the list. You might say, what about Boudica? Uh, Her husband, before he died, basically gave them to the Romans. All right. The story of Boudica was that, you know, sure, the Romans came in and conquered everything, and there was a will and stuff like that from the ex-king, but they didn't have any say of the matter until she made it about herself and getting justice for her family. That doesn't mean, I don't mean to say that her daughters were not raped, but that, you know, nobody thought about what Boudica wanted until she rallied everyone against the Romans. Um, you know, admittedly, in England and Ireland, women had more stuff, but like just going down the list, it's
Well,
it's just a
that's one
bad
of
situation.
I think that's one of John C. Wright's arguments about against against female suffrage, and the argument that he was making that other people have been, tried to respond to, depending on how satisfying you find it, is that women are dependents. They said, they go, well, women aren't children, and he goes, no, they're not, but like children, they are dependents.
Yep. Like I am, since my father's been sick and all that jazz, I am straight up the strongest person in my family. I earned the most money too because of COVID, and a whole bunch of other stuff I just don't want to talk about.
Right.
If I wasn't there to take care, and like part of the reason why I want to go to Vietnam is because I want to inflation depression proof my family. And by the way, inflation is coming. Like it is. They have printed so much money this year; it is unreal. I'm pretty sure it's the backup plan if Trump wins. I wouldn't be surprised. But like, my mom wouldn't be able to support herself with her physical infirmities, and my little brother who has autism, and my dad who's sick and almost lost a leg. Like it without, you know, my sister's a doctor, and she would take care of him. But even then, the stress of her doctorship is almost killing her. She hasn't been in a relationship since middle school. Um, it's a bad situation for her, even though she's made it to doctor, and she's the type of person I would trust as a doctor. Um, you know, it's got a whole bunch of costs to it that honestly, like, from what I can tell, like when she talks to other female doctors or surgeons, like one goes, yeah, you know, I do my surgery and I do it by basically becoming a sociopath until the job's done. You know, like turning off all the emotion and stuff like that. That's not healthy. Even if it's what the job requires, it's not a healthy way to do anything.
No, but it's what men do when they become soldiers. It's what men do in war. But that's the thing. Historically, it's always been the province of men.
Yeah. Oh well, it's one of those things. Like we're in a modern world, and that's what the modern world looks like. Um, what can we do about it?
Yeah, I don't say this with any bitterness, nor do I say this. I mean, I'm speaking in generalities here, not specifics. John C. Wright's argument is that women are inherently going to be dependents. That men essentially would be able to run society on their own and better than they would be able to run society with women around. So the fact that we have should what sort of say should women have in running society? Well, the answer is that they are, I don't I would need to ask him exactly what his argument is, and I would need to reread it. But I think I get the idea that he's going for there, which is that the people who are taking the risk, the ones who have the real risk and the real responsibility are the men in society. Pretty much always. With
Yeah.
one except and only one exception, and it is the exception that Christianity marked out from time immemorial and has turned into something sacred, and that is motherhood.
Yep. Like in Orestes, the Greek play that's about Clytemnestra.
Ah, yes, I love, I
Uh,
love, I love
Orestes.
Orestes.
Yeah. Uh, the argument that gets Orestes off. Yeah, his name is Orestes. Yeah, that gets Orestes off the hook is
Wasn't it
that
Agamemnon off?
no. So
I'm going off of memory though. Let me
Okay.
look it up.
No, so the plot is that Agamemnon comes back with Cassandra, who immediately goes, "Your wife's gonna kill you." Yeah, I know, but I bring back slaves all the time. She'll get over it. No, I mean she's literally going to kill you over me. Eh, and over the fact that you murdered her daughter to get good sailing weather to go to Troy. Eh, like that's literally Agamemnon's reaction. Like, but it's also Cassandra, and no one believes Cassandra because she's always talking crazy. Um, so
So,
no, hold on.
yeah,
And so Agamemnon comes back. Clytemnestra murders Agamemnon with an axe and lets her lover take over the throne. Orestes comes back and murders Clytemnestra and her lover. In turn, because again the Greeks have a familicide taboo, the Furies basically pursue him all as he traipses across Greece trying to find a solution. He comes to Athens, and Athena and Apollo. Athena acts as judge. There's a jury, and Apollo is for the defense. Not even joking. Um, they basically win with the argument that because how do I want to do it? That the semen is more important than the egg, and that
no, I
even
remember this. The specific argument that Athena makes is that she is the one who casts the deciding vote and determines that Orestes is not killed. And she says that because she sprang from Zeus's head with no father or with no mother, that proves that women are not necessary. Which actually, people said the interesting thing about this is that's not even the myth. The myth is that Zeus ate Athena's mother after turning her into a fly. This is real. This is the actual myth.
right.
Menace. Uh, he ate her, and then that turned into Athena, who sprang out of his forehead. But Athena claims that, after all, she didn't have a mother. She sprang straight from Zeus's head, so the men are more important.
Therefore, Orestes gets off for murdering Clytemnestra, his mother. And it's like, sure, she killed Agamemnon and all that jazz, and deserved the justice that she got, but it's very, it's very amusing uh, how they treat everyone in that story.
It's a great trilogy, by the way. I greatly enjoy all three stories: Agamemnon, the Libation Bearers, and the Eumenides.
Eumenides.
Possibly. I don't know. I'm not sure how it's pronounced. I've never heard it said out loud.
I love Greek pronunciations. It's great.
Eumenides, Eumenides, I'm not sure. But I'm actually a big fan of the Orestia.
Talking like a dang Thracian. Can't pronounce a decent play anyway. It's funny because the people who like Greeks look down on were basically other Greeks, except they live slightly north of them. It's great.
Well, yes.
Yes.
The Macedonians.
Ugly, despicable. They'll never amount to anything.
Fun fact, Macedonia has no extradition treaty with the US.
Really?
So if you ever kill a man and gotta run, it's not a bad pick.
It is not. But you'd have to put up with Macedonians.
You would. I actually don't think it's a very good country. I'm pretty sure Macedonia is a pretty shitty place, but I mean that's why. And basically, if you don't have an extradition treaty with the U.S., you're probably a pretty shitty place.
Yeah. It's so like it's part of the old Cold War Balkan bloc, which was like poorly treated by everything because it wasn't even like Yugoslavia where it got all the cool stuff. Um, and I think it was part of Yugoslavia. Oh, what was it? It was it. It's weird. That whole thing is like super weird, and like yeah, like they didn't get all the investment that the other parts of the Balkans did, and then burned down when they fell apart in the 90s. Hmm.
Yeah. So the moral of the story is, if you ever gotta run, just keep it in the back of your mind.
When you actually gotta, kill that vampire in front of everyone, just know that there's no treaty with, extradition treaty with Macedon. It's very important. All right.
Mhm.
Well, admittedly, I'm enjoying Hades despite all the weird stuff in it. Um,
It's the gameplay that I think makes it more than anything else.
I would
People
not
overrate
tolerate.
the writing in Hades.
Yeah. In general, people overrate like decent writing. Very common. It's weird because it's like you and I both know that decent writing is like not even that rare based on like what gets published and all that jazz. But it's like people still go gaga over it. I don't know. I don't understand the plebs, Anthony. I don't. I just kind of accept it. You heard it here
But
for. Yeah,
Ben,
yeah.
you need to go over my story.
I do actually. I need to do that. I'm nearly done with Ken's. I'm just doing a little touch up on it and like making sure things fit, and then I'll do yours, and it'll be I'm sure perfectly serviceable. Um, yeah.
After any edits.
After many edits. All right. So, well, guys, thank you for joining us this week. It's always a pleasure to talk about Greek myths and you know all the other stuff we get up to. Have a good one.